Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to the Bahrain preview video. This one is going to focus on the first weekend. The first weekend of two in Bahrain, of course, but on very different track configuration. It's a circuit that's going to be very different to the ones that we've just come out of. Of course, the last part of the season was the European season, but in the autumn, not something we're necessarily used to. Going to some very cold places, some new tracks. As we saw in Turkey, fresh tarmac that was very smooth and made it very difficult challenge for the tyres. We got a different set of challenges in Bahrain this time out because this track surface is it's actually made up of tarmac from the UK, believe it or not. Same surface that was put down in Abu Dhabi, shipped all the way from the UK, and it is very abrasive. In fact, one of the most abrasive of the season. You may well have seen my video a couple of days ago about what the tarmac means for grip, how tarmac and tyres can interact. I'll link it up in the corner up there if you haven't seen it, or link it in the description too. But don't forget, this is an evening race. That means that by the time we get to the business end of things, qualifying and the Grand Prix itself, the sun's gone down, the temperatures drop accordingly as well, and we actually get very different conditions to those you might expect in the Middle East during the daytime. And that also means that the practice sessions of FP1 and FP3 on Saturday morning are not useless, but they're certainly not in any way representative of the circuit conditions that we'll be facing when we get to those important sessions of qualifying in the race. Pirelli have brought the middle three tyres from their compound range, the C2, C3 and C4. That's one step softer than they brought to this race last year, where it was mostly a two-stop race. And that was partly because most people didn't want to use the hard tyre last year because they just felt it was too hard for this particular circuit. That meant we were forced onto the softer end of the range, the soft and the mediums last year, and that forced most people into a two-stop event. This year they've gone one step softer with a view to trying to bring all three tyres into play because that hard last year was too hard. What it could do is mean that using the hard this time around could mean that we might see a one-stop race for some drivers, maybe even most drivers, but we'll have to see how that plays out with the conditions. Either way, I'm looking forward to a fantastic weekend. It feels much more like a traditional Formula One weekend, back into the flyaway races, further afield, as I say, with sunshine and then floodlights. And in this video, we're going to take you around a lap, slowly stopping to look at every corner, every little detail, and how the car might be interacting with that particular part of the circuit. And then at the end, we'll take you on a hot lap and see if I can put it all together. Right, let's get the gloves on and take you for a ride. Okay, so we're starting the lap in at sunset, more or less where we'll be at the point of qualifying. Coming onto the start-finish straight, the exit, like always, is crucial because we've got a long straight here where the exit of the final corner can determine your speed as we get down to the first braking point just here, just as the curb starts on the left-hand side. And it's a massive braking zone, and that's something that this circuit is absolutely full of. It's a tough track on brakes, one of the hardest Grand Prix on brakes of the season. We've got to get the car slowed all the way down from 8th gear and maximum speed, probably down to 2nd, maybe 3rd gear, before we turn it into a really tight first corner. We've got to try and clip the apex curb there, but don't hit it because it's big and it will unsettle the car. But then we've got to get back over some way to the right hand side before we can fling it into this left. Run over all of this curb to straight line it as much as possible. Use some of that exit curb as well and get the throttle down as early as we can, as hard as we can, over this second DRS zone and onto another little burst down this straight here. Okay then, climbing up this hill as hard as we can, staying all the way over to the left hand side, even using more than the circuit with the left hand side of the car. These brake markers on the left, looking for around the 100-metre mark to slam on the brakes again. Another really big stop, generating massive temperature in the brakes. All of the weight will transfer to the front axle as we brake in a straight line as best we can, equally loading the front tyres, keeping it straight, and once we scrub the speed off, we can then turn in. Again, same thing, use the inside curb but not too much because it's big, and then it tightens up on exit, so gentle on the throttle. The car wants to roll the weight over to the left hand side. As we get on the throttle, the weight transfers rearwards, putting pressure onto those rear tyres, allowing more traction, but it's a fine balancing act to get that done without braking traction and spitting yourself off. running over the curb, staying left, running over the white line again, and then this is a slightly tricky one because we're braking and turning at the same time, scrubbing speed off, but running through this right-hander before we then go into a really tricky middle sector of the lap, running downhill, quite a lot of elevation change and some really tricky braking zones coming up. Through this section then we need a really stiff anti-roll bar setup because we're flinging the car at really high speed, using the downforce that we've got to generate grip, but trying to maintain or minimise the weight transfer so that the car doesn't fling over too much to the right hand side as we come through here at really high speed. The car's hanging on for dear life at this point. You need all the aerodynamic grip as well as the mechanical grip you can. Out over the curb and then back down this steep hill. We've got gravity on our side pulling us down the hill, but that also means that braking has to be done just a little bit earlier than you might normally expect for this really tight right-hander. Scrubbing speed all the way off from about 6th gear down to 2nd gear, and a really tight corner here to the right hand side where it's very easy both to run out wide on the exit, but also as you get back on the power, because you're in such a low gear at this point, really easy to spin the rear tyres up and generate heat in them and of course lose traction. But look, now we head up the hill, so now we want to get back on the power. The weight is transferring back towards the rear. We're climbing up a hill. We need to get power down, but balancing that with traction is really difficult and crucial for this part of the lap. Keeping tyre temperature under control through this part is key to winning or losing lap time. Okay, once we've got that power down, we're coming back over to the right hand side, over a blind crest. Look at that, we can't really see what's coming up. We know we've got to be out over the curb. The turn-in point is almost blind, and we have to sacrifice this first part of the corner because this is perhaps one of the most tricky parts of the entire lap to get right. You can win or lose a huge amount of lap time through here, and the main reason for that is that it's such a difficult braking zone and then traction on the way out. On the way into this corner, you'll see a lot of drivers making a very quick adjustment to the brake balance, rolling it more towards the rear. And the biggest reason for that is as we turn in, this is one of these corners where there is no choice but to brake and turn at the same time. And the moment we start turning the steering wheel, look, we need to be scrubbing speed off from this point. But we have to turn the steering wheel. As soon as you turn the steering wheel, it puts a load, a sort of twisting load through the car. It unbalances both of those front tyres, puts cross weight into the car. And once they're unbalanced and not evenly loaded anymore, it's really easy to lock a tyre. And though if we roll the brake balance more towards the rear, it just takes a little bit of that braking pressure off the front axle, a little bit more onto the rear, and gives us a better fighting chance of not locking brakes up. I'm sure you'll still see people locking brakes through here. Sacrifice the first part of the corner, stay away from the apex, don't worry about it, and then we're aiming for that curb pretty much in the direction the car's facing now. We're going to make the corner into a big V section, so we try and straight line it as much as we can, get as much of that braking done in a straight line right to the point where we get out to the curb, and then we can think about unloading the brakes and turning the car in. So hopefully we've scrubbed enough speed off. We run out as far as we go, as we dare, probably down to 2nd gear, and then we can start to lift off the brakes and roll the car into another really tight corner. This is a left-hander, of course, slightly unusual for this particular circuit, but once we come through here, we're immediately into a DRS zone, a long straight, hard on the throttle again, so getting the car straightened up out of that corner as soon as possible so we can bury the throttle is absolutely key. Staying over to the right hand side, we can run all the way down this straight with DRS open, right around the edge of the track here, because we want to be out as wide as possible for the next left-hander down here. Now we jump on the brakes again. This is a fast corner, again one that's massively limited by your aero capabilities because you need to keep the speed up through here. So as we start to climb up, we're turning in at high speed, as I say, the aerodynamics pushing the car down into the tarmac. The tyres, by the time we get through this sector, are screaming out for mercy because we've got a fast left-hander followed by a fast right-hander. And this is flat out. The throttle is hard into the base of the chassis as we cling to the right-hand side, again trusting that the aero loads will keep the car planted. You're going way faster than you feel like the mechanical grip could possibly cope with, and it's only those aero loads that are keeping it from sliding. Running out to the left-hand side then, again jump on the brakes, and now we've got a right-hander with a long straight beyond it, so getting through here keeping the minimum speed. People talk about keeping the minimum speed up. That's the minimum speed through the corner needs to be as high as possible, which means we need to brake in a straight line, roll off the pedal, keep the minimum speed up, and then early on the throttle on the way out. Again, the aero load's really playing a part through here. You can use some of that inside curve, run it out wide, not too wide, and then all the way down this straight, flat out, almost ducking into the car if you can, trying to minimise the disruption your crash helmet plays. Before we jump onto the throttle, onto the brake again, scrubbing the speed off, down to probably 4th gear, the final corner of the circuit where we crush over this curb. But again, if you go too heavily, it'll unsettle the car. It'll bounce the rear end up in the air, you'll lose traction, and as you want to get on the throttle back onto this start-finish straight, your rear wheels are oscillating. You may have seen it in slow-mos on the telly. When they're oscillating, they're not in a firm, stable contact patch with the racetrack, and you start to lose grip. But by this point, your tyres are massively spiking in temperature, having come through that really high speed section just before we go onto that straight, and you need to have some tyre life in terms of temperature and wear, of course, left by the time you get to this corner so that we can maximise our exit. Run it out wide, bury the throttle hard, and on we go down that start-finish straight again with DRS wide open, reaching maximum speeds, and on we go for another lap. Right, let's see if I can show you if I can put all that together. Well, there you go. It was not a bad lap time, but as you probably saw from the delta up in the top right corner, I could have gone loads faster. I lost a load of time, and that's one of the things this circuit is really easy to do. Nailing a hot lap means getting every single detail right, as it always does, but it's really easy to make a tiny mistake, particularly through that middle section of the lap, and lose, well, all of your representative lap time. So you've got to be focused, you've got to be absolutely concentrated, well prepared, and very different set of challenges to the ones that the drivers and teams have faced over the last couple of races. Perhaps a little bit more normal in terms of that. I'm really looking forward to it because, as I say, although qualifying is always key, there are definite overtaking opportunities. Remember that amazing race between Hamilton and Rosberg, I guess kind of sums it up. It's a brilliant, brilliant circuit. It feels a little bit different, of course, under the lights as well, which just makes it a little bit of a special atmosphere. It was always great to be there. Shame there's no fans to enjoy it, of course, but this is going to be, I think, a really great finale to the season. We've got some really close battles. The championship may well be done and dusted, but that midfield battle is as tight as I've seen it for years, and I still, at this point, don't really know which way it's going to go. This weekend, though, might give us some good idea of which direction things are starting to head as we go through this final 3 races in the Middle East.